Hi and welcome to another video at Just So TV. We are having a look at this Bernina 830 today. I am just about to take it out of its case. It's a machine that hasn't been serviced yet. I've had a brief look at it. So I'm going to take you through some of the things that I'm going to be doing along with the capacitor repair, which is one of the things I get asked a lot about. Sorry, it's not a capacitor repair, it's a capacitor replacement. But hopefully this video you'll find semi-useful. Do let us know in the comments anything we can improve. Obviously I'm not a professional video maker, but I am trying a new technique in this video where I am putting a screen within the screen. So hopefully that will enable you to see a little bit more of what I'm doing with a top-down view as well as the standard view from my iPhone. So without further ado, let's get on with the video, and I will interject where I feel necessary just to let you know what's going on. In case anyone's wondering, that is a golf bag cover that was in with the machine, and I thought it was actually a Bernina cover that I'd never seen before. It fits the machine perfectly, as you can see, and just sits over the bed and the top of the machine and protects it. So yeah, really cool thing. So there's no hidden button on the 830, the top cover just pops straight up. I'm just having a little look here just at the machine, and I'm going to remove the presser foot and the needle. Now I've got the accessory box because it's got one of the needle clamp screwdrivers, but as you'll see I had a little bit of a problem releasing the needle with it. There was something not quite right. It was almost as if the prong on the little tool was too long. Funnily enough, once I got the needle out by using another screwdriver, when I came to reinsert a needle, that wasn't an issue any longer. So I don't really know what happened with regards to that. So in order to take the bed cover off, you have to press a little latch which is on the left hand side just above the cover. That then springs off and you can see into the bed of the machine. So I'm just taking the bobbin case and the shuttle out and putting it to one side before just giving a quick once over, removing the bulb that was in the machine, which was just a cheap 15 watt bulb. Looked like a Chinese style bulb that probably emitted quite a lot of heat. I'm not a big fan of those bulbs. I've switched to LED for numerous reasons, but mainly because they do not produce any heat. So any lubrication you have on the needle bar, or where the needle bar swings in the chassis of the machine where you would oil, there's no heat, so it doesn't dry out any oil you put there. So here I'm going to open up the foot control for the first time. This is a Bernina electronic machine, so there's a circuit board in this foot control, and usually the capacitors inside here would need replacing. Once inside the foot control, it became apparent that everything was in good order. It looks like the capacitors have been changed in the past. The little carbon tracer pins also looked in really good condition, so I think the previous owner had this machine looked after by certainly somebody that knew what they were doing. As you can see, it's got a thumbs up. Everything looks immaculate. So here I'm just getting some denim material. It's a good idea to have something soft to lean your machine on. Obviously you've got all your knobs and buttons on the other side of the machine, and that enables you to lean the machine over, because what we're going to do now is remove the base plate, and then we'll be able to remove the motor housing and the back cover so we can work on the motor. So now we've got the motor housing back cover off, we can actually see the motor properly for the first time, and the capacitor was well and truly shot. Trying to zoom in a little bit here just so you get a slightly better look at the motor. But I'm going to remove this capacitor and hopefully you'll be able to see what poor condition it was in. It's literally crept out of its casing, so that kind of orange band at the top was originally fully inside that black sheath. So there's a big old crack on the capacitor, and it's swollen so much that it's actually travelled out, as you can see here. squeeze the arm, but I'm just checking the motor brushes here. The motor looks in good condition. The commutator is relatively clean and soot free from the carbon buildup. You can just see it shining away there in the little gap. So I'm just taking the cover off there and checking that brush, and there's plenty of years life left in those. They're almost brand new. Really has been looked after well, this machine, in the past. So we don't need to change those motor brushes. The only thing we need to do with regards to the motor is replace the capacitor. So just coming into shot here is the capacitors that I sell. This is the same spec as the original capacitor. Now, the advantage of this capacitor is that the resistor that was built into the wire on the old capacitor is actually inside this capacitor, so we don't need to worry about positioning the resistor. We just have the capacitor to put in place, so it's simply 4 wires. So it's easy to put this little ground earth wire on the motor before you slide the motor in, and then you can do the other 3 wires that need to go into the housing of the motor. So there's some colour changes to the wires, and I do get asked this quite a lot. I do provide a little pamphlet, or I email you if you buy one of these capacitors with the conversion for the wires from the original. So there was 2 types of colour coding on the wires on the old Berninas. So the blue wire on the new capacitor, regardless of the motor, will go to where the white wire went. The black wire goes to where the black wires go on both the original first motor and the second motor. There was a version that had a grey wire. That is now the red, and there's also a version where that grey wire was brown. That is also the red. And of course the yellow, which goes to the motor, which is the earth, could either be transparent or a green and yellow wire. So they're the conversions. So this can be quite a fiddly part. You need some long nose pliers so you can push down the spade connectors onto the brass receptacles that are built into the motor housing. In fact, as I go to put the capacitor in here, the red wire is not fully seated and pops back out. Now, if you have a Bernina 830 that has the minimum maximum speed switch, which a lot of the electronic versions do, this one happens not to, because it has the knee lift control for the presser foot lift. You will have another 2 wires going into the motor housing, so it gets quite crowded in there and can be quite tricky to actually see what you're doing. So whilst we've got the base cover off the machine, there's a couple of bits we can oil from underneath. So we're just dropping a couple of drops of oil on there, and also on the mechanism that works the knee lift. Now, not all 830s are going to have that knee lift mechanism, but it's a good idea to give it a little bit of lubrication. Now we're just going to pop that little base cover back on the machine before we work on the rest of it. So now we're going to install one of our LED bulbs that I mentioned earlier. This is the bulb that we have available. We sell in our online store, which is justsosewmachines.co.uk. You can go to the shop and buy those super bright 5 LED bulbs. We do them in both the bayonet and Edison version, and they pretty much fit every domestic sewing machine that takes a 15 watt light bulb. These LED bulbs are 1 watt, so they're more energy efficient and they don't produce any heat. You may wonder what I'm putting in this little pot. It's a pot I carry around everywhere with me. It has some various common screws in it that are probably the cleanest screws anyone has, because they constantly live in a bath of alcohol. So I've just put some alcohol in that pot, and what I generally do is use Q-tips and a couple of wipes that also get soaked in the alcohol to clean the machine. I'm currently just using my tweezers to get some of the built up lint out of the feed dogs, but in general this machine was really well looked after and in good shape, so I didn't have to do too much cleaning really. Now, something I always do that I kind of do recommend you do and don't is actually take the shuttle carrier out, mainly because it's an area that never gets cleaned, and you can see that nylon gear that sits in the back there. That's often packed with lint where, you know, it's not part of the servicing in general to take that out, but if you move the hand wheel and you haven't made a note of its exact position, then you will mess up the hook timing of your machine. So what I recommend you do is have the carrier set so that, how can I put this, sort of, it's kind of banana shaped, so the top of the banana is pointing straight up, and then you know that when you position that back in the machine, that's going to go in the same place. If you move the hand wheel and move the needle, then you are going to then need to retime the machine. So it's one of those things I always do, but if you decide to do it yourself, be very, very careful. But it does enable you to clean right in the back there, and also properly lubricate that little bushing that the shaft here sits in. So again, we're just giving any old gummy oil that's built up over time a good old clean, so the machine is nice and spick and span. And then what we will do is just go and oil all the recommended oiling points on the machine. There's a couple of extras that I tend to drop a drop of oil on, especially if it's a machine that I haven't serviced regularly. But all those kind of oiling points, and some of the Berninas, they will be marked with little red dots, so it's really easy to do general maintenance on these machines. I do have these wonderful oilers, as you can see in my hand, that have a 4-inch spout, so you can get to pretty much everything with these oilers. And again, they're sold in our shop. I do these oilers. I also do the specific oil for the new Berninas with the jumbo bobbins. That's a slightly more viscous oil, but for most of the Bernina records and vintage Berninas, this is the oil you want. I do it in a short nibbed oiler where the nib's about 1.5 centimeters, and then the jumbo oiler, which comes with 50 ml of oil and this great big applicator, and that retails for about £15. So it's a really good bargain, especially if you've got a vintage machine, because you do need to keep on top of oiling the machine and oiling the hook between your regular servicing. So I'm just undoing the screws now that hold the tension unit into the lid of the sewing machine. It's not very clear from this shot, but you get a lot of lint from your cotton actually build up either side of the tension discs. So it's a good idea to remove the tension unit, give it a good clean, check between the discs and just make sure everything is really super clean. Just using the alcohol now just to clean between those discs, give them a final polish before we reinstall the tension unit into the machine. Because we're using alcohol, nothing's going to remain wet, it's just going to evaporate into the air, but it's really good for cleaning all the parts of the sewing machine. And we've got a bit more alcohol on this Q-tip, and we're just going to clean the inside of the shuttle. Again, that usually houses some nasty fluff, so give that a good clean, make sure your shuttle's gleaming, and then we can add a drop of oil to the shuttle and reinstall it into the machine. We're just doing a final clear of the race before we do that. we're just finishing off oiling all the oil points on the machine, making sure that everything is moving nice and freely and everything's well lubricated before we actually run the machine properly. If you buy a second-hand machine, a vintage machine, it's so tempting to get it out of the box and check to see if it runs, but it's a real good idea just to obviously plug it in, check it works, but don't put much strain on the machine. Even just move it by hand just to see what's going on, because you don't know when that machine was last serviced or what condition it could be in, and just putting force through the mechanisms could crack a gear and cause you all sorts of problems. So as I was saying earlier about not trying the machine, I haven't tried it at all yet. I haven't even switched it on. So I'm just trying the machine now and nothing's happening. Now, the main reason for this in the UK would be a blown fuse. So UK plugs all have their own fuses. All our sockets have an individual switch and all our plugs have our own fuses. So what's likely happened is when that capacitor blew, the fuse in the plug also blew as a safety measure. So I'm just taking this fuse out, which is a 3 amp fuse. There's no visual indication that the fuse is blown, they just blow. Sometimes even when you have a new fuse and you put it into the machine, it doesn't work. You might need to try a second fuse because they are made by their hundreds of thousands, you know, they're made by their millions even, and there's very little, if any, quality control. Well, they do have quality control, but you imagine something produced in such high quantities, sometimes you just get a bad one. So I always have a good supply of 3 amp fuses, which is the correct ampage for sewing machines. So we're just popping this fuse back into the plug, popping the cover back on, we'll screw it back together and we'll give it a try. And here we go, we're plugged in, and as you can see the LED lights come to life and the machine is now running. Doesn't that machine sound sweet? There's nothing quite like the purr of a Bernina, and you can see here just how bright those LED lights are. They really do make a difference to your sewing area, so they're definitely worth buying. So again, the last bit to oil really is the flywheel, just a couple of drops of oil there and we'll put the clutch back in place. That just ensures that when we declutch the machine, the needle's not going to move up and down. If you find that when you release your clutch, when you're winding the bobbin and your needle is moving up and down, or it's moving up and down slowly, that is what's going on. There's not enough lubrication there. So you don't need to over lubricate it, just a little drop of oil, and that will solve that problem. Now things are getting exciting. The machine is pretty much ready to sew. All we've got to do now is wind the bobbin, put the machine bed back on the machine, and install a needle and the foot. So the bobbin's winding nicely now, nice and even. I do keep my finger on top of the spool because I do tend to wind quite fast, and that just ensures that you have a really nice tight packed bobbin. There's nothing worse than a loose bobbin, because that will cause you all sorts of tension issues. You must wind your bobbins well. Another thing I see a lot of the time is people winding different threads on bobbins. Some bobbins look like a bullseye. They have so many different types of coloured thread on them. Try and keep each bobbin for a specific thread and colour. We do sell Bernina bobbins in packs of 5 and 10 for vintage machines, and we also sell a brilliant little bobbin storage tower as well that holds up to about 30 bobbins and stops your threads getting tangled all over your sewing space or in a drawer. So it's definitely worth considering if you're one of those sewers that has multiple coloured threads on the go. Yeah, just buy some extra bobbins. They're really not that expensive, and it will negate sort of issues you may have from badly wound bobbins where you're winding a thread on top of the other and causing yourself some tension issues. So all that's left to do now is get the machine ready and do some test sewing. So we've threaded the machine up with my favourite colour, purple thread. It's a Gutermann thread, and we're just getting a bit of calico, which is what we like to test the machines with, and we're going to run it through its stitches. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to try the machine on a zigzag so we can get a good look at the tension and how the machine's performing, see if we need to make any adjustments. But as I sew this sample and check the back, the tension is absolutely perfect. And so I'll leave you now just to watch the final sew off of this machine as I run it through all its decorative stitches. I'll need to change the foot twice on this test sew. So we have the standard foot on for most of the running stitches, and then we will switch to the embroidery foot for all the decorative embroidery patterns, and finally to the buttonhole foot when we test the buttonhole. one last thing to note, sorry, I forgot to say, is when you sew a buttonhole on any of these vintage Berninas, you need to thread the eye of the finger on the bobbin case, and that will slightly increase the tension without you having to actually play with the bobbin case tension or the top tension on the machine, and that will ensure that you get a really nice buttonhole. So just sorting the threads out here and getting ready to sew. We have a 5-step buttonhole with the Bernina 830, and we're just going to run it through those buttonhole steps. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. It's quite a new channel, and just finding my way through YouTube. So if you find it useful, give it a share, give it a thumbs up. It's much appreciated. And I will stop rambling now and let you just watch the end of this sewing. Any of the products I've mentioned are available at www.justsewsewingmachines.co.uk. Just navigate to the shop and you'll find all the bits that I've mentioned, along with this specific 830, which has just gone up for sale. Okay, thank you.